I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, the testimony of former FBI Director James Comey before the Senate Intelligence Committee on the way Donald Trump interacted with him while Director Comey was leading the investigations into General Michael Flynn and into any possible collusion between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. One of the problems we face right now, especially if we're in journalism, is finding a way to get a balanced approach, a nonpartisan approach. Very often you either get a Democratic approach in which Trump is the devil, you get a Republican approach where he's not. It's not clear where they stand. But it's always wonderful, therefore, to be able to speak to one individual who brings a balanced perspective to virtually everything he talks about. You've heard him many times here on JBS. He's one of America's leading activists and champions of civil rights, human rights. He's been involved in all kinds of famous cases. He is a most celebrated author, and he is, without question, one of the individuals who has a voice of courage when it comes to tackling some of the most difficult political and sensitive issues confronting America today. It's an honor to have back on our phones Alan Dershowitz, who joins us from Paris. Is it Paris or just France?
No, I'm in Alsace, France,
Alsace,
a place that used to have lots and lots of Jews, but very, very few today, although tomorrow I'm going to the synagogue in Strasbourg.
Oh, how wonderful.
It'll be interesting to see that, yeah.
Now, you did watch the hearings. What was your reaction?
Well, I think that legally Trump came out way ahead and politically way behind. Legally he came out ahead because Comey announced that he believed that the Constitution authorizes the president to direct the head of the FBI to stop an investigation. He accepted the view that I've been expressing on television now for several months and that almost nobody else has agreed with. What I've said is under our unitary system of the executive, the president can tell the Justice Department and the FBI who to prosecute, who not to prosecute, who to investigate, who not to investigate. It's a terrible system, but it's the American system. It's the system that was used by Thomas Jefferson, by Abraham Lincoln, by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, by John Kennedy, by George Bush I, and by Barack Obama. They have, in all instances, tried to influence Justice Department and FBI investigations, and Comey today acknowledged that that's the constitutional rule. If that's the rule, then the president cannot be prosecuted for simply exercising his appropriate constitutional power. And it doesn't matter whether he simply requested, hoped that Comey would drop the investigation of Flynn, or whether it was taken as an order, because, as Comey says, even if it was an order, it was a lawful order, just like the firing of Comey was a lawful firing. So we ought to take the whole issue of obstruction of justice off the table. It's just not there, and talk about the politics of it. Did he do the right thing? Did he do the wrong thing? What do the people think about what he did? Was there collusion between the campaign and the Russians? Those are the important issues, but they've been distorted by Democratic pundits on television and others insisting that he committed a crime when you can't commit a crime as president by simply exercising your constitutional authority. It's not like what Nixon did. Nixon instructed his aides to lie to the FBI. That's a crime. He instructed his aides to pay hush money to witnesses who would have testified against him. That's a crime. It's much more like what President Bush did. President Bush pardoned Caspar Weinberger on the eve of his trial, even though Weinberger might have testified against President Bush, and yet nobody called for his impeachment, nobody called for his indictment on obstruction of justice. So I think we're now out of the legal part of the case and into the more political part.
Did Donald Trump lie as far as you could tell?
Well, according to Comey, he seemed to have stated things that Comey disagrees with. Well, first, let's talk about when he told the truth. President Trump told the truth when he said that on several occasions Comey told him he was not being investigated. It's the media who got that wrong, and President Trump got that right. There were other issues on which Comey said that he had a different understanding of what the truth was from President Bush. You know, Comey is mad at Bush. He got fired. He got fired in a very undignified way. And I think he let his anger seep through today. And he used words that probably he doesn't have a basis for using against President Trump. Did President Trump do the right thing by firing him? It certainly backfired. But Comey also, he showed very great lack of courage when he leaked these memos through a friend who's a Columbia law professor. He should have had the courage to stand up and face the press and tell them that. The idea that the FBI head leaks things at a time when he's complaining about others leaking seemed to me to be somewhat hypocritical, and his excuse that he was afraid of the seagulls and he didn't want people coming to his house. That's not the way the director of the FBI should conduct business.
I have heard people who are somewhat knowledgeable, they're aghast that he fired Comey. The suggestion at one point was he did it to kill the Russian investigation. According to Comey, no one ever asked him to stop the overall Russian investigation. What's your answer if somebody says to you, how can a president fire? You say it's in his right, but the sense we get when we watch, as you say, Democratic pundits on television, the sense we get is that is tantamount to what some of the things that Nixon did in Watergate. Explain to us one more time. Why is it different?
Well, because the president didn't do anything unlawful. All he did was exercise his constitutional authority to fire the head of the FBI and to get the head of the FBI to try to stop the investigation of Flynn. But remember that Comey testified that he was never asked to stop the investigation of the Russian matter. In fact, he was told by Trump, please continue the investigation, and if any of my satellite people, any of my staff people are involved, I want to know about it and do it as quickly as possible. There was another disagreement, and that is Comey was asked by Trump, please release to the public the fact that I'm not under investigation. And Comey wouldn't do that, which is probably why he was fired. That involves the Russian thing. But President Trump had the right to ask his director of the FBI to disclose publicly that he was not being investigated, and Comey didn't obey an order from the president, and that would justify his firing, and it would justify his firing over the Russian thing without there being any kind of an obstruction of justice.
Okay, Alan, answer me one now, a personal question. There are going to be people listening to you on JBS right now. They're going to be shocked that Alan Dershowitz seems to be defending any piece of the Trump behavior as it applies to Comey. They're going to call you the equivalent, if this was in racial terms, of an Uncle Tom. What do you say to them?
Well, first, I ignore that. I've been doing this for 50 years. I defended Richard Nixon's against when he was named as an unindicted co-conspirator. I thought that was unfair. I defended Hillary Clinton when people were yelling, lock him up. By the way, the very same people who are defending Trump now were using exactly the same tactics against Hillary Clinton. And when I defended Hillary Clinton, Republicans were saying, oh, my God, how can you do that? I am not defending Donald Trump. I didn't vote for him. I am defending civil liberties because today it's Donald Trump. Tomorrow, yesterday, rather, it was Hillary Clinton. Tomorrow it could be anybody. It could be you. It could be me. And so when I defend the civil liberties of Donald Trump, I'm defending everybody's civil liberties. I'm not voting for him. I'm not saying what he did was right or proper or good. I'm saying it wasn't illegal. There are two categories of people. People too stupid to understand the distinction I'm making, and I excuse that. And the other group, I don't excuse. They understand what I'm saying. They pretend not to understand it. And pretending not to understand it, they accuse me of being a Trump supporter. I'm not. I'm a supporter of civil liberties. I'm going to continue to do it. When you're doing what I've been doing for years, you develop a thick skin, and you just tend to ignore people's accusations against you. I spent my whole life fighting against the extreme right and the extreme left. The left hates me more than the right hates me. The right hates me very greatly. And so I'm going to stay where I am. I'm going to continue to call it as I see it. Sometimes what I say will help Trump. Sometimes it will hurt him. Sometimes when I say helped Hillary Clinton, sometimes it hurt her. I was critical of Bill Clinton going on the airplane to see Loretta Lynch, and I was critical of Lynch agreeing to see the president. But I didn't think that Hillary Clinton committed any crimes by the way she used her email. It was wrong the way she used it. I didn't think she committed any crimes, and I said so. And people on the right criticized me mercilessly. How can you do that? How can you do that? Today, people on the left are criticizing me. So be it. I'm going to continue to call it as I see it and to focus on civil liberties rather than politics.
Well, I appreciate you enormously. I've said it many, many times. People probably getting tired of my saying it, but I believe it needs to be said. My very last question for you. Sure. Take it out of the legal realm and now talk to me about politics. Is there going to be a move based on Comey's testimony and this whole Russian scandal, do you believe, to actually remove Trump one way or the other from office? And if there's an attempt to do so, Alan, at the moment, what odds do you give that people will be able to remove Donald Trump?
Based on the current situation, I would give 100-0 odds that he would not be impeached or removed from office. I would take that bet. I'd have to have something on the other side, so let's make it 100-1. But the actual odds are 100-0. Once the midterm elections occur, things could be different. If more information emerges, if it turns out that there was very significant collusion between the Kremlin and the Trump campaign, that would change things, and that would change things legitimately. We do not want to see our presidential candidates collaborating with our enemies to produce an electoral victory. By the way, Ronald Reagan collaborated with the Iranians when he was elected and was president-elect to keep the American hostages a month longer so that he would get the credit for releasing them rather than Jimmy Carter getting that credit. So presidents have, made improper deals with enemies over the years of presidents-elect that violates the Logan Act, but nobody enforces the Logan Act. So unless more information and different information comes out, or unless the Democrats get substantial control over both the House and the Senate, President Trump is here to serve out his term. Whether he gets reelected, that's a political issue, and I'm not going to comment on that.
Beautifully done, Alan. My guess is there are 18,000 people trying to reach you tonight, and I am so grateful you gave us some time. Have a nice, enjoyable time in France, and we'll talk to you again when you're back in the States.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
Be well. There you have it, the thoughts of Alan Dershowitz on the testimony of James Comey, former FBI Director, before the Senate Intelligence Committee. I imagine there are going to be people in the JBS audience if you have, if you skew liberal and you vote Democrat and you think that it's just a shanda that Donald Trump is president, you will have been very much pleased by the analysis of most of the news coming out of the Comey hearings. I've talked to many people today who've told me, oh, Trump is done. Trump is done. They've proven obstruction of justice. They've proven all of the terrible things that people feel about him. The reality is, in my own view, and this has nothing to do with whether I like Trump or don't like Trump, I sort of feel as Alan does. It's wishful thinking. It's projecting onto Comey what you hoped he had said. As Alan says, Comey makes it clear he was never asked to stop the Russian investigation, and that's what everybody told me. That was the reason Trump fired Comey, because he was insisting on doing the Russian investigation. Comey says, I was never asked to stop the overall Russian investigation. And in fact, Trump said, as you heard Alan Dershowitz just say, Trump told Comey that he wanted that done as vigorously as possible. There's a question over the investigations into Michael Flynn, who was the former National Security Advisor. And there Alan is saying that the president had every right to say something about what he wanted Comey to do or not do. Do we like it? As Alan said, was it the right thing to do? That's not the issue at the moment in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee. It's whether the president, engaged in any kind of obstruction of justice. It does not seem to be on the face of it, at least according to Alan Dershowitz, that there was any such behavior. Also in the news, by the way, is the Jewish community's commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War of 1967. All week, we've been having special programming. We've had many guests, both on L'chaim and guests who've been appearing all over the tri-state area, who've been talking about the significance of the Six-Day War. I've received so many wonderful, wonderful comments from so many of you expressing your appreciation for the JBS programming. I received a wonderful note from Ander Rosen about the interview we did with Avi Perry, who fought in the Six-Day War. Received many people commented on the documentary we're running, 6 Days in June, a fabulous film, a 2-hour documentary that takes one from the days before the Six-Day War of June 5th, right through the war. An extraordinary piece of documentary work. I hope if you haven't seen it yet, you will. Yossi Klein Halevi on the Chaim. And there was a roundtable discussion with some fabulous thoughts by Abe Foxman and Eric Yaffe and Thane Rosenbaum and Betty Ehrenberg. By the way, we got a very thoughtful email from Ted Richmond, who pointed out there was an error made by Thane Rosenbaum, a minor error, but still an error. Thane talked about 10% of the Jewish population being killed during the War of Independence. Actually, it was 1%, not 10%. And there was another very interesting question asked by Jeff Aronson, who asked me why I did not stress the divine hand in the winning of the Six-Day War by the State of Israel. And I do my best to answer every email I receive, and I tried to answer Jeff. But the reality is that I know there are many people who believe Israel's victory in the Six-Day War was a literal miracle. Not a miracle in quotation marks, not a miracle we didn't believe it would happen, but that it was a miracle akin to the miracles of the Torah, the splitting of the Red Sea, God stopping the sun so that the Israelites could win a battle. Those kind of miracles, and if you've watched Jewish 101 here on JBS, I don't have any problem with anyone who, for him or herself, believes there is a God in heaven who literally stops the sun or splits the sea or causes Israel to win a war it does not have the military might to win. My own predilection is to take the teaching of the rabbinic tradition, which says that at one point in time, and this is said many times in the Midrash, at one point in time, God says to human beings, I've given you free will, and I've given you the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. It is your job now to build as beautiful and as lovely a world as possible, and where you see evil, and there will be evil because people are cruel to each other, sometimes ghastly cruel. And they do have a Yetzer Hara which sometimes goes unchecked and wild. But the Jewish tradition believes that God also said human beings, men and women of all ages, have in their soul a precious piece of the divine, that's the Yetzer Tov. The Jewish tradition says we use both the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov to build a more beautiful world. The trick in life, according to the Jewish tradition, is to take every selfish impulse that any one of us may have and direct it for social good. And that God promises. He promised after the flood to Noah, and he promised in that famous Midrash where he says, the law is as the rabbis say it is. And another rabbi stands up and says, you said, you taught, the Torah is in heaven. The Torah is in heaven. And I'm so excited by this, I'm saying it backwards. You said, you taught, the Torah is not in heaven. Lo bashamayim hi. The Torah is on our hands, in our mouths, in our hearts. We must effectuate Torah. We must effectuate people's good and whatever rescue we can make for any individual who is oppressed. So for me, the Israeli people, and people of goodwill in general, but certainly the Israeli people during the Six-Day War, were motivated by a sense of the divine. But if there was a miracle, it was a miracle at the hands of the Israeli army. Those who had the courage and the willingness to launch a preemptive strike that ultimately took out the Egyptian Air Force, the Syrian Air Force, and allowed Israel to win a six-day war. This isn't the kind of miracle where God splits the Red Sea. It's a miracle where human beings, reacting to the divine in life, do something holy and do something that saves humanity. And for me, the Six-Day War was not simply about Israel. It was about humanity as a whole. The State of Israel taught the world something. It changed Jewish identity. It resurrected Jewish life in the former Soviet Union. And it taught the world that if one stands up to a bully, justice can prevail, and in some way, a brighter future can be built for all. That is the message of the Six-Day War. So Jeff is right. I did not stress any kind of divine hand in the Six-Day War. I believe it was human hands guided or inspired by their sense of the divine. But ultimately, it was the State of Israel and the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, which created a miracle for Jewish life. There's an insight by Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great Rabbi Heschel, who said, miracles don't change nature. Miracles change human nature. That's what I believe happened in the Six-Day War. So, Jeff, I appreciate your comment. I appreciate any comment I receive. I am so appreciative of all of you who wrote to me about the Six-Day War programming we've been able to show you. We will continue to bring you as relevant, as informative programming as we possibly can. And I love it when I hear from you. As always, my thanks to our Director Sloan Copeland, Production Coordinator Serge Goldberg, JBS's Associate Director Dara Golub, Editor John McDevitt, and to the producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.